Life flows best when we don't try to force it. Pushing too hard often leads to frustration and disappointment. Instead, cultivating patience and allowing things to unfold naturally can bring surprising rewards. This doesn't mean being passive or giving up on our goals. Rather, it's about finding balance, taking inspired action while remaining flexible and open to what emerges. When we stop trying to control every outcome, we create space for unexpected opportunities and growth. Consider how nature operates. A seed doesn't force its way out of the ground. It responds to the right conditions, sunlight, water, nutrients, and grows steadily over time. In the same way, our dreams and aspirations often need the right environment to flourish. Forcing things usually comes from a place of fear or insecurity. We worry that if we don't make something happen right now, we'll miss out or fall behind. But this urgency can blind us to better paths forward. When we pause and tune into our inner wisdom, we gain clarity on when to act. Letting go of force doesn't mean abandoning effort or discipline. It's about aligning our actions with the natural flow of life rather than constantly swimming against the current. This approach conserves our energy and allows us to sustain our efforts over the long term. Consider relationships. Trying to force a connection or make someone feel a certain way rarely works. Authentic bonds develop organically when we show up as our true selves and allow others the space to do the same. Forced interactions often feel awkward and inauthentic. The same principle applies to personal growth. We can't force ourselves to change overnight or become someone we're not. Lasting transformation happens gradually as we consistently take small steps in the right direction. It's a process of unfolding rather than forcing. In our careers, forcing our way up the ladder often leads to burnout and dissatisfaction. When we instead focus on developing our skills and providing value, opportunities tend to arise naturally. Our path may not look exactly as we imagined, but it can lead to even more rewarding outcomes. Creativity also thrives when we release the need to force it. Writer's block often comes from pressuring ourselves to produce. When we step back and allow ideas to percolate, inspiration flows more freely. Some of our best insights come when we're relaxed and open. Even in challenging situations, force rarely improves things. When we face obstacles, taking a breath and approaching them with curiosity and flexibility yields better results than charging ahead blindly. There's usually a way around under or through if we stay calm and creative. Of course, there are times when decisive action is needed. But even then, coming from a place of inner alignment rather than frantic forcing leads to clearer choices and more effective results. We can be purposeful without being pushy. Learning to recognize when we're forcing things is a valuable skill. Notice when you feel tense, anxious, or like you're trying to control everything. These are often signs that you're pushing too hard. Take a step back and ask what would happen if you ease up a bit. Releasing the need to force doesn't mean becoming apathetic. It's about finding a middle ground between passive acceptance and aggressive control. We can have clear intentions and take inspired action while remaining open to how things unfold. This approach requires trust in ourselves, in others, and in the larger flow of life. It means believing that even if things don't go exactly as planned, we have the resilience and resourcefulness to adapt. This trust allows us to relax and engage more fully with each moment. When we stop forcing, we often find that things we've been struggling with start to shift on their own. Relationships improve, creative blocks dissolve, and new opportunities appear. It's as if by loosening our grip, we allow life to breathe and expand. This principle applies to our inner world as well. Trying to force ourselves to feel happy all the time or suppress difficult emotions doesn't work. When we allow our full range of feelings without judgment, we process them more easily and return to balance naturally. In the realm of personal development, forcing change through sheer willpower often leads to frustration. Sustainable growth comes from understanding our patterns, addressing root causes, and making incremental shifts. It's a dance of conscious effort and allowing. Consider how this applies to health and fitness. Crash diets and extreme exercise regimens rarely lead to lasting results. A more balanced approach, making gradual lifestyle changes and listening to our bodies, tends to be more effective and enjoyable in the long run. In our fast-paced world, there's constant pressure to make things happen quickly. But nature shows us that the most enduring creations take time. A mighty oak grows slowly but stands for centuries. When we align with this natural rhythm, we build something truly lasting. Releasing the need to force also frees up mental and emotional energy. Instead of constantly pushing and striving, we can direct that energy towards being present, enjoying life, and noticing the opportunities around us. This receptive state often leads to greater success than frantic activity. Think about times in your life when things fell into place effortlessly. Often these moments come when we've released attachment to a specific outcome and open ourselves to possibilities. By cultivating this state more often, we invite more flow and synchronicity into our lives. This doesn't mean we become passive observers. It's about finding the right balance between effort and ease. We set intentions, take inspired action, and then allow things to unfold without micromanaging every detail. This approach leads to more sustainable and fulfilling results. In our relationships, not forcing things means respecting others' boundaries and timing. It means allowing connections to develop naturally rather than rushing intimacy or commitment. This creates space for authentic bonds to form based on mutual understanding and shared values. At work, it might mean focusing on doing our best rather than obsessing over promotions or recognition. When we consistently show up with excellence and enthusiasm, advancement often follows naturally. And if it doesn't, we're in a better position to explore other opportunities that align with our strengths and values. In creative pursuits, not forcing means trusting the process. Ideas and inspiration often come in their own time. By cultivating patience and staying open, we allow our creativity to flourish. Some of the greatest works of art and innovations have emerged from periods of seeming inactivity. When it comes to personal growth, forcing change often leads to resistance and setbacks. A gentler approach, making small, consistent shifts and being kind to ourselves along the way, tends to yield more lasting transformation. It's about progress, not perfection. This principle even applies to problem solving. When we're stuck, forcing a solution rarely works. Taking a step back, allowing our minds to rest, and approaching the issue from a fresh perspective often leads to breakthroughs. Some of our best ideas come when we're not actively trying to find them. In our spiritual or philosophical pursuits, forcing beliefs or experiences can lead to dogmatism or disillusionment. Genuine insight and growth come from remaining open, questioning deeply, and allowing our understanding to evolve naturally over time. Consider how this applies to goal setting. While it's important to have clear objectives, holding too tightly to specific outcomes can blind us to even better possibilities. By focusing on the direction we want to move in rather than rigid endpoints, we stay open to unexpected opportunities. In our daily lives, not forcing things might mean going with the flow more often. If traffic is heavy, instead of getting stressed, we could use the time to listen to an interesting podcast. If plans fall through, we might discover a new activity we enjoy. Flexibility often leads to pleasant surprises. This approach also helps in dealing with difficult emotions. Rather than trying to force ourselves to get over sadness or anger, allowing ourselves to feel and process these emotions naturally leads to genuine healing and growth. It's about moving through rather than suppressing. When it comes to making decisions, forcing ourselves to choose before we're ready often leads to regret. Taking the time to gather information, consult our intuition, and allow clarity to emerge naturally usually results in choices we feel good about in the long run. In our quest for knowledge and skill development, forcing ourselves to absorb information quickly often leads to shallow understanding. Allowing time for deep learning, practice, and integration leads to true mastery. It's about quality of understanding rather than quantity of information. This principle is particularly relevant in today's age of constant connectivity. Instead of forcing ourselves to always be available and responsive, creating boundaries and allowing for periods of disconnection can lead to greater productivity and well-being in the long run. When it comes to lifestyle changes, forcing radical shifts often leads to burnout. Gradual, sustainable changes, like slowly incorporating more vegetables into our diet or adding short walks to our daily routine, tend to stick better and lead to lasting improvements in our health and habits. In our financial lives, trying to force quick riches often leads to poor decisions and unnecessary risk. A more balanced approach, consistent saving, wise investing, and patience tends to build lasting wealth and financial security. It's about steady progress rather than get rich, quick schemes. This concept also applies to our environment. Forcing order through rigid organization systems often leads to frustration. Creating spaces that naturally support our lifestyle and work patterns tends to be more effective. It's about working with our tendencies rather than against them. In our pursuit of happiness, forcing ourselves to always be positive can backfire. True contentment comes from accepting the full range of human experiences and emotions. It's about finding peace within ourselves rather than trying to control external circumstances. When dealing with others, not forcing our views or way of doing things leads to better relationships and collaborations. By remaining open to different perspectives and finding common ground, we create more harmonious and productive interactions. This principle is especially important in parenting and education. Forcing children to conform to rigid expectations often stifles their natural curiosity and potential. Creating supportive environments that allow for exploration and growth leads to more confident, capable individuals. In our spiritual or personal growth journeys, forcing enlightenment or breakthroughs often leads to frustration. True insights and transformations tend to come when we create space for them through consistent practice and openness. It's about tending the soul rather than pulling on the plant. When it comes to health, forcing our bodies beyond their limits often leads to injury or burnout. Listening to our bodies, respecting their signals, and gradually building strength and endurance leads to sustainable fitness and well-being. It's about working with our bodies, not against them. In creative work, forcing originality often leads to contrived or derivative results. True innovation comes from deeply engaging with our craft, being open to inspiration, and allowing our unique voice to emerge naturally. It's about authenticity rather than trying to be different for its own sake. This approach is valuable in conflict resolution as well. Forcing agreement or compromise often leads to resentment and unresolved issues. Taking the time to truly understand each perspective and find solutions that address underlying needs tends to create more lasting resolutions. When facing life transitions, trying to force quick adaptation often leads to stress and overwhelm. Allowing ourselves time to process changes, grieve what we're leaving behind, and gradually adjust to new circumstances leads to healthier transitions and personal growth. In our quest for self-improvement, forcing ourselves to adopt habits or traits that don't align with our core values rarely works long-term. Identifying changes that resonate deeply with who we are and what matters to us leads to more authentic and lasting personal development. This principle applies to leadership as well. Leaders who try to force compliance often create resistance and disengagement. Those who inspire, empower, and create environments where people can thrive naturally tend to build more successful and innovative organizations. When it comes to communication, forcing our point or talking over others rarely leads to understanding. Creating space for dialogue, truly listening, and allowing conversations to unfold naturally tends to lead to deeper connections and more productive exchanges. In our pursuit of knowledge, forcing ourselves to stick to one field or perspective can limit our understanding. Allowing our curiosity to guide us in making connections across disciplines often leads to more innovative insights and a richer comprehension of the world. This approach is particularly relevant in today's rapidly changing world. Instead of trying to force stability or cling to the familiar, developing adaptability and resilience allows us to navigate change more effectively. It's about being flexible rather than rigid in the face of uncertainty. When it comes to personal style or self-expression, forcing ourselves to fit into current trends often feels inauthentic. Allowing our unique preferences and personality to shine through naturally leads to a more confident and genuine presentation of ourselves in our spiritual or philosophical explorations. Forcing certainty or clinging to fixed beliefs can limit our growth. Remaining open to new ideas, questioning our assumptions, and allowing our understanding to evolve leads to deeper wisdom and a more nuanced worldview. This principle is important in education and skill development. Forcing rote memorization or rigid learning paths often leads to shallow understanding. Creating environments that encourage curiosity, experimentation, and personal connection to the material leads to deeper, more lasting learning. When dealing with addiction or harmful habits, forcing abstinence through willpower alone rarely leads to lasting change. Addressing root causes, developing healthier coping mechanisms, and allowing for gradual progress tends to create more sustainable recovery and personal growth. In our relationships with technology, forcing constant connectivity often leads to stress and decreased productivity. Creating intentional boundaries and allowing for periods of digital detox can lead to better focus, creativity, and overall well being in our increasingly online world. When it comes to social change, forcing compliance often leads to resistance and superficial shifts. Inspiring others through example, fostering dialogue, and creating systems that naturally encourage desired behaviors tends to lead to more profound and lasting societal transformations. This approach is valuable in negotiation and conflict resolution. Instead of forcing our position, seeking to understand all perspectives and finding creative solutions that address underlying needs often leads to outcomes that benefit everyone involved. In our pursuit of success, forcing ourselves to follow someone else's path rarely leads to fulfillment. Allowing ourselves to define success on our own terms and pursue goals that align with our values and strengths leads to more meaningful achievements and personal satisfaction. When facing challenges or setbacks, forcing a quick fix or pushing through without addressing underlying issues often leads to recurring problems. Taking the time to understand root causes, learn from experiences, and make thoughtful adjustments leads to more resilient solutions. This principle applies to organizational change as well. Forcing new systems or cultures from the top down often meets with resistance. Involving team members in the process, addressing concerns, and allowing for organic adoption of new practices tends to lead to more successful transformations. In our quest for personal growth, forcing ourselves to confront every fear or weakness at once can be overwhelming. Allowing ourselves to grow at a sustainable pace, celebrating small victories, and building confidence gradually often leads to more lasting changes and fewer setbacks. When it comes to creativity and innovation, forcing breakthroughs rarely works. Creating environments that support exploration, allowing for periods of rest and incubation, and remaining open to unexpected connections often leads to more groundbreaking ideas and solutions. This approach is particularly relevant in our relationship with nature. Forcing control over natural systems often leads to unintended consequences. Working with natural processes, respecting ecological balance, and allowing for regeneration leads to more sustainable and harmonious interactions with our environment. In our pursuit of mindfulness or presence, forcing ourselves to focus or eliminate thoughts often creates more mental chatter. Allowing thoughts to come and go without judgment, gently returning to the present moment, and cultivating an attitude of acceptance leads to deeper states of awareness. When facing difficult decisions, forcing a choice before we're ready often leads to regret. Allowing ourselves time to gather information, consult our intuition, and let clarity emerge naturally usually results in choices we feel confident about and can stand behind. This principle is valuable in team dynamics and collaboration. Forcing consensus or suppressing dissent often leads to superficial agreement and unexpressed resentment. Creating space for diverse viewpoints, encouraging respectful disagreement, and allowing solutions to emerge through dialogue tends to lead to more innovative and robust outcomes. In our personal development journeys, forcing ourselves to overcome every perceived flaw or weakness can be exhausting and counterproductive. Accepting ourselves as we are, focusing on our strengths, and allowing gradual growth in areas we want to improve often leads to more authentic and sustainable personal evolution. When it comes to lifestyle changes, forcing dramatic shifts often leads to burnout and reversion to old habits. Making small, consistent changes, allowing new behaviors to become natural over time, and being patient with the process tends to lead to more lasting transformations. This approach is particularly relevant in parenting and education. Forcing children into predetermined molds or paths often stifles their natural talents and interests. Creating supportive environments that allow for exploration, failure, and self-discovery tends to nurture more confident, capable, and fulfilled individuals. In our pursuit of knowledge and expertise, forcing ourselves to become instant experts often leads to superficial understanding. Allowing ourselves to be beginners, embracing the learning process, and gradually building depth of knowledge over time leads to true mastery and a lifelong love of learning. When dealing with grief or loss, forcing ourselves to move on or suppress emotions often leads to prolonged suffering. Allowing ourselves to feel fully, honoring our experiences, and gently moving forward at our own pace tends to lead to more genuine healing and growth. This principle applies to organizational culture as well. Forcing values or behaviors through rigid policies often leads to compliance without buy-in. Cultivating environments where desired values are lived and modeled, allowing for organic adoption, tends to create more authentic and resilient cultures. In our relationship with time, forcing productivity every moment often leads to burnout and decreased effectiveness. Allowing for periods of rest, reflection, and seemingly unproductive activities often leads to greater creativity, insight, and overall productivity in the long run. When facing global challenges, forcing quick fixes or one-size-fits-all solutions rarely addresses complex issues effectively. Allowing for diverse approaches, fostering collaboration, and being patient with gradual progress often leads to more sustainable and comprehensive solutions. This approach is valuable in conflict resolution, both personal and professional. Forcing agreement or suppressing disagreements often leads to underlying tensions and recurring issues. Creating space for open dialogue, allowing all parties to feel heard, and working towards mutually beneficial solutions tends to lead to more lasting resolutions. In our pursuit of physical fitness, forcing our bodies beyond their limits often leads to injury and setbacks. Listening to our bodies gradually increasing intensity and allowing for proper rest and recovery leads to more sustainable fitness gains and overall well-being. When it comes to personal growth, forcing rapid change in multiple areas simultaneously often leads to overwhelm and burnout. Allowing ourselves to focus on one or two key areas at a time, building habits gradually, and celebrating small victories leads to more sustainable and meaningful personal development. This principle is particularly relevant in our approach to mental health. Forcing ourselves to just be happy or suppress negative emotions often exacerbates psychological distress. Allowing ourselves to acknowledge and process all emotions, seeking support when needed, and gently working towards healthier thought patterns tends to lead to more genuine emotional well-being. In our professional lives, forcing ourselves to climb the corporate ladder or pursue a career path that doesn't align with our values often leads to dissatisfaction and burnout. Allowing ourselves to explore different options, prioritize what truly matters to us, and make career decisions based on personal fulfillment as well as practical considerations often leads to more satisfying and sustainable professional lives. When it comes to creativity, forcing inspiration or adhering strictly to conventions often stifles genuine expression. Allowing ourselves to experiment, embrace imperfection, and follow our curiosity often leads to more authentic and innovative creative work. This approach is valuable in problem solving. Forcing a solution or sticking rigidly to familiar methods often limits our ability to address complex issues. Allowing ourselves to approach problems from multiple angles, collaborate with others, and remain open to unconventional ideas often leads to more effective and innovative solutions. In our spiritual or philosophical pursuits, forcing belief or clinging to dogma often limits our growth and understanding. Allowing ourselves to question, explore different perspectives, and let our worldview evolve naturally often leads to deeper wisdom and a more nuanced understanding of life's big questions. When it comes to social change, forcing compliance or relying solely on top-down mandates often leads to resistance and superficial shifts. Allowing for grassroots movements, fostering dialogue between different groups, and creating systems that naturally incentivize desired behaviors often leads to more profound and lasting societal transformations. This principle applies to education as well. Forcing students to memorize facts or conform to standardized testing often fails to cultivate true learning and critical thinking skills. Allowing for more personalized learning paths, encouraging curiosity and creativity, and focusing on developing adaptable skills often leads to more engaged and capable learners. In our relationships, Forcing intimacy or trying to change others often leads to resentment and distance. Allowing relationships to develop at their own pace, accepting others as they are, and focusing on our own growth often leads to more authentic and fulfilling connections. When it comes to decision making, forcing quick choices without adequate information often leads to regret. Allowing ourselves time to gather data, consult our intuition, and let clarity emerge naturally often results in decisions we feel confident about and can stand behind. This approach is particularly relevant in our relationship with technology. Forcing ourselves to keep up with every new trend or be constantly connected often leads to stress and decreased well being. Allowing ourselves to use technology intentionally, create healthy boundaries, and prioritize real world experiences often leads to a more balanced and fulfilling relationship with digital tools. In our pursuit of financial success, forcing get rich quick schemes or taking on excessive risk often leads to loss and stress. Allowing for steady growth, making informed decisions, and aligning our financial choices with our values often leads to more sustainable prosperity and peace of mind. When facing life transitions, forcing quick adaptation or suppressing the emotions that come with change often leads to prolonged struggle. Allowing ourselves time to process, grieve what we're leaving behind, and gradually adjust to new circumstances often leads to healthier transitions and personal growth. This principle is valuable in conflict resolution. Forcing agreement or suppressing disagreements often leads to underlying tensions and recurring issues. Allowing space for all parties to express their views, seeking to understand underlying needs, and working towards mutually beneficial solutions often leads to more lasting resolutions. In our approach to health and wellness, forcing extreme diets or workout regimens often leads to yo-yo effects and burnout. Allowing for gradual lifestyle changes, listening to our bodies, and finding forms of nutrition and movement that we genuinely enjoy often leads to more sustainable health improvements. When it comes to personal style and self-expression, forcing ourselves to fit into current trends or others' expectations often feels inauthentic. Allowing our unique preferences and personality to shine through naturally often leads to a more confident and genuine presentation of ourselves to the world. This approach is particularly relevant in leadership. Forcing compliance or micromanaging often leads to disengagement and stifled innovation. Allowing team members autonomy, fostering an environment of trust and open communication, and leading by example often results in more motivated and high-performing teams. In our pursuit of knowledge, forcing ourselves to stick to one discipline or perspective often limits our understanding. Allowing ourselves to explore connections between different fields, remain open to new ideas, and approach learning with curiosity often leads to more innovative insights and a richer comprehension of the world. When dealing with addiction or harmful habits, forcing abstinence through willpower alone rarely leads to lasting change. Allowing ourselves to address root causes, develop healthier coping mechanisms, and make gradual progress often creates more sustainable recovery and personal growth. This principle applies to organizational change as well. Forcing new systems or cultures from the top down often meets with resistance. Allowing for employee input, addressing concerns, and giving time for organic adoption of new practices often leads to more successful and lasting transformations. In our relationship with nature, forcing control or exploitation often leads to ecological imbalance and long-term harm. Allowing for sustainable practices, respecting natural rhythms, and seeking harmony with our environment often leads to more beneficial outcomes for both humans and the planet. When facing global challenges, forcing quick fixes or one-size-fits-all solutions rarely addresses complex issues effectively. Allowing for diverse approaches, fostering international cooperation, and being patient with gradual progress often leads to more comprehensive and sustainable. This approach is valuable in personal development. Forcing ourselves to conform to others' definitions of success often leads to inner conflict and dissatisfaction. Allowing ourselves to define success on our own terms, pursue goals that align with our values, and celebrate our unique journey often leads to a more fulfilling and authentic life. In our creative pursuits, forcing originality or trying to mimic other styles often leads to contrived or derivative work. Allowing our unique voice to emerge through practice, experimentation, and self reflection often results in more genuine and impactful creative expression. When it comes to communication, forcing our point or dominating conversations rarely leads, allowing for active listening, creating space for others to express themselves, and approaching discussions with openness and empathy often leads to more productive and meaningful exchanges. This principle is particularly relevant in our approach to time management. Forcing rigid schedules or constant productivity often leads to stress and burnout. Allowing for flexibility, recognizing the importance of downtime, and aligning our use of time with our priorities often leads to a more balanced and satisfying life. In our pursuit of happiness, forcing positive thinking or suppressing negative emotions often leads to inauthenticity and emotional repression. Allowing ourselves to experience the full range of human emotions, finding healthy ways to process feelings, and cultivating gratitude naturally often leads to more genuine and lasting well being. When facing setbacks or failures, forcing immediate recovery or denying the impact often hinders genuine growth. Allowing ourselves to acknowledge disappointments, learn from experiences, and gradually rebuild confidence often leads to greater resilience and wisdom. This approach is valuable in team dynamics and collaboration. Forcing consensus or suppressing dissenting voices often leads to groupthink and missed opportunities. Allowing for diverse perspectives, encouraging respectful debate, and valuing each team member's unique contributions often leads to more innovative and robust outcomes. In our spiritual or philosophical explorations, forcing certainty or clinging to fixed beliefs can limit our growth. Allowing ourselves to embrace mystery, question our assumptions, and remain open to new understandings often leads to a deeper and more nuanced worldview. When it comes to social interactions, forcing ourselves into situations that don't align with our authentic selves often leads to discomfort and inauthenticity. Allowing ourselves to honor our natural tendencies, set healthy boundaries, and connect with others in ways that feel genuine often leads to more meaningful and satisfying relationships. This principle applies to goal setting as well. Forcing ourselves to pursue goals that don't truly resonate with us often leads to lack of motivation and fulfillment. Allowing ourselves to set intentions that align with our values, adjusting our path as we grow and learn, and celebrating progress along the way often leads to more meaningful achievements and personal satisfaction.